The sun dipped below the jagged peaks of the Red Keep, casting a reddish hue across the towers of King's Landing. Lord Eddard Stark stood silently in the tower room that once belonged to Jon Arryn, staring out toward the sea, his expression as hard and cold as the stone walls surrounding him. He was Hand of the King now, but the weight of the realm's decay was already pressing upon his shoulders. King Robert Baratheon was not the man he once knew. The warrior who led armies had become a man of indulgence, drinking, hunting, whoring. Worse still, his marriage to Queen Cersei Lannister had brought a serpent into the heart of the realm. Ned had seen the way she manipulated the court, how the Lannisters accumulated power under Robert's nose, and how little the king noticed or cared. But Ned had not come to King's Landing to watch the kingdom fall. He had come to protect it, and he knew that as long as Cersei sat beside Robert, war was inevitable. That night, after a long council meeting where Varys had smirked too knowingly and Littlefinger had spoken too slickly, Ned invited Robert to his chambers for a private drink away from spies and flatterers. Robert slumped into the chair, grumbling about taxes and boredom. "I'm not made for numbers and scrolls, Ned. I need a sword in my hand, not a damn quill." Ned poured 2 cups of strong arbor red. Then, "Let's put the sword back in your hand, Robert." The king raised an eyebrow. "What the hell does that mean?" Ned sat across from him. "You married the wrong woman." Robert scoffed. 7 hells, Ned. You think I don't know that? "I think you've endured it too long," Ned said, his voice low and steady. "Cersei is no queen. She's a lion among sheep, clawing at power with no love for you or the realm. She's poisoned your court, and your children. They are not yours." The room fell silent. Robert's jaw tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's a way out. Divorce her. Send her back to Casterly Rock. Break the chain." Robert's eyes burned. "The High Septon would never." "He would if we remind him who holds the swords," Ned cut in. "And if you offer the realm a better queen?" Robert narrowed his eyes. "And who is this better queen?" "Lyanna Mormont." The king blinked. "A child, a northerner, loyal, noble, fierce," Ned said. "She comes from the line of warriors. The Mormonts have never bowed to pressure. Not from Targaryens, not from Lannisters. Bear Island's loyalty is earned, not bought. You want the North. Win it with blood and honor. Marry into it." Robert slammed the cup down, wine splashing. "She's named after your sister." "I know," Ned replied. "And unlike Cersei, she would never betray you. She would grow into a queen worthy of the realm." Robert leaned back, staring at the fire. His voice softened. "I loved your sister, and I lost her to a crown and a lie. Then take back your legacy. Rebuild your reign with honor, not lies." A heavy silence lingered between them, broken only by the crackling flames. Robert spoke, half to himself. Tywin would rage. "Let him," Ned said coldly. "Let him rage. If he dares raise a hand, the North will rise. The Riverlands will follow. And if we move quickly, so will the Vale." The king turned and looked Ned in the eye, truly looked at him for the first time. "In years, you've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about how to save your reign." Robert took a long drink. "Then let's say I do it. Cast her out. Take this girl. What then? Then you rule, truly. With a queen who owes you loyalty, you put the Lannisters back in their place. And you remind the realm that the Baratheon stag still runs strong." Robert sat in silence. Outside, the wind howled softly over the Blackwater Bay. Finally, he smiled, faint, bitter, but real. "You're a cold bastard, Ned." "I am," Ned replied. "But I serve the realm." And in that moment, the first stone was set in a path that would change the future of Westeros forever. The Red Keep buzzed like a disturbed hornet's nest. Whispers of Queen Cersei's looming dismissal had already begun to snake through the corridors, fed by the silence of the king's chambers and the absence of her usual presence at court. It had only been a week since Robert began entertaining Ned's proposition in earnest, but already the foundation beneath the lioness had begun to crack. Cersei Lannister, however, was no fool. She knew when she was being cornered. She stood alone. In her solar, the heavy drapes drawn, her green eyes gleaming in the candlelight like a hunting cat. Jaime had left earlier that morning, sent to Harrenhal by Robert on a thinly veiled pretext, but Cersei had sensed the true motive. Robert was removing her allies, one by one. Even her uncle Kevon was suddenly being kept at arm's length. The dismissal was coming, and with it, the humiliation of the entire Lannister name. But worse than humiliation was danger. If Robert removed her, the truth about her children could surface. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tominal would be deemed illegitimate bastards. She would be labeled an a traitor. The punishment: death. She had to act fast and without Jaime at her side. She turned to the one creature in King's Landing more dangerous than any night Batir. Baelish. When Cersei arrived unannounced at Littlefinger's chamber, in the Tower of the Hand, he already knew why she was there. He smiled thinly, bowing with mock courtesy. "Your grace honors me, or should I say, your former grace." Cersei didn't blink. "You play games, Littlefinger. I play for blood. Which side are you on?" Petyr stepped forward, clasping his hands. "I'm on the side of survival. Always have been." "Then help me survive." Littlefinger's grin widened. "And what does survival cost these days? I want Ned Stark ruined. I want this girl from Bear Island shamed. I want whispers in the court that she's unnatural, that she consorts with wildlings, that she is no fit queen." "You're asking me to start a whisper war against a child?" Cersei's eyes burned. "A child who stands between me and my life. If I fall, Petyr, so do you. Do not forget whose gold keeps this city afloat." Petyr chuckled. "Ah, but it's not gold that wins wars. It's stories, and I'm very good at stories." Cersei handed him a scroll, then spread this one. "Let the realm know what kind of queen the North sends. While you do, I'll remind Robert why he once feared the Lannister." Meanwhile, across the city, Ned Stark met with the Lords of the North, the Vale, and the Riverlands quietly summoned to King's Landing under various excuses: border treaties, tax negotiations, and minor feasts. But they all knew the real reason. The realm was shifting. Hoster Tully, Lord of Riverrun, sat across from Ned in a secluded chamber. His once strong frame had grown frail, but his eyes still burned with the fire of old loyalty. "So," Hoster said, "you would have the king cast off a queen and marry a girl who's yet to see her 14th name day." "She is fierce," Ned said. "She is of the blood of House Mormont, sworn bannermen to the north for centuries. She speaks with more honor than half this court combined." "She is a child, Eddard," Hoster replied, "and Cersei is a lioness. This will not go without blood." "I know," Ned said grimly, "but if we do nothing, that blood comes anyway at the hands of Lannister." To Ned's surprise, the Lord of the Vale, Jon Arryn's nephew Elbert, also supported the move. Better a girl from Bear Island than a lioness who poisons kings. The Vale stands with the north. Whispers spread across the 7 kingdoms. Some scoffed at the idea Robert Baratheon, a man of war and wine, marrying a wild girl from the frozen north. Madness, but others saw it as a bold correction. A return to the honor of old Cersei's final card came days later. She stood before Robert in the great hall, surrounded by her remaining allies. "You would shame me, Robert. Throw me aside for a child. I bore you 3 children. Robert stared at her, his voice heavy with cold fury. "No, you bore him." His gasps echoed through the hall. The courtiers froze. Ser Barristan lowered his eyes. Varys watched in silence. Only Ned stood firm at Robert's side. Cersei paled. You cannot prove that." "I don't have to," Robert growled. "I am king, and I am done pretending." And just like that, Queen Cersei Lannister was dismissed. Her guards disarmed, her rights revoked, and while she was escorted to her private chambers to await departure for Casterly Rock, her mind was already plotting how to burn the kingdom down in return. The lioness had been caged, but not broken. The storm that followed Cersei's dismissal did not come from Lannisport or Casterly Rock. It came from within the Red Keep itself. Joffrey Baratheon, the supposed heir to the Iron Throne, had never been told the truth of his parentage, and, when the news broke, first whispered in the halls, then declared in the throne room, his rage ignited like wildfire. Joffrey confronted his father in the Tower of the Hand, flanked by 2 of the remaining Lannister guards loyal to Cersei. The king had been drinking, but his wits were not dulled. When the boy entered the room unannounced, Ned stepped between him and the king. "You have no right to be here, boy," Ned said. "I am the crown prince." Joffrey snarled. "You have no right to remove my mother." Robert didn't rise from his seat. Instead, he stared at the boy with the weight of a decade of regret. "You are no prince," he muttered. "You're the product of treason and incest." Those words shattered whatever illusion remained. Joffrey lunged not with a sword, but with fury. One of the Lannister guards drew steel, but Ned was faster. Ice rang through the air, and in moments, the confrontation was over. The guards were disarmed. Joffrey was held back by Ser Barristan Selmy himself, now loyal to the king again. It was over. Robert had spoken, and Joffrey, for the first time in his life, was powerless. Over the following days, Robert Baratheon, for once, took his role seriously. He personally signed the orders. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen were to be declared wards of the crown and sent 2 separate noble houses across the realm for fostering, a polite way of removing them from play. Cersei was confined under soft house arrest in the Tower of the Maiden, guarded by men who answered only to Ned. In her place, whispers of a new queen echoed through the halls, but not all were pleased. Renly Baratheon, Robert's younger brother, took the news poorly. "You're marrying a Mormont," he barked in council. "A girl who plays war with wooden swords and speaks like a sergeant." "She's a northerner," Robert replied. "She'll be loyal." "She's a child," Renly countered. "This realm needs a queen, not a girl dressed in wolf's clothing." But Robert was unmoved. "I need someone who won't lie to me while I sleep beside her." Renly left court that night without further word, but not before exchanging glances with Loras Tyrell. 2 weeks later, the royal ship Stormcloud arrived at White Harbour to bring Lady Lyanna Mormont to King's Landing. The lords of Bear Island had hesitated at first, but once Maester Luwin delivered the raven, stamped with both the king's seal and Lord Stark's own hand, they accepted. "The king wants our bear mage," Mormont had said. "Then he must honor her like a queen." Laynna Mormont was just 13, but she rode with the posture of a commander and the stare of a direwolf. She was no court lady. She arrived at the Red Keep in boiled leather and furs, riding her northern steed and flanked by shield maidens. The court gawked. Varys whispered, "She's half a cub and half a commander." Littlefinger smiled. "She's a bear. Best not to corner her." Robert met her in the courtyard, surrounded by banners and confusion. She dismounted without help and bowed low. "Your Grace," she said, "I come as Lady of Bear Island, and if the realm needs a queen, I will not flinch." Robert, amused and impressed, chuckled. "You sound more like a warrior than a lady." "I was taught both," she replied. "One makes a speech, the other survives." The court remained silent, but inside, Ned Stark stood taller than he had in weeks. The girl from Bear Island had arrived. Preparations for the wedding were immediate, but the realm did not. Rest easy in the Westerlands, Tywin Lannister was sharpening more than just words. He took the insult to House Lannister as a declaration of war. His daughter cast aside, his grandchildren declared illegitimate, his name tarnished across the Seven Kingdoms. And worst of all, he hadn't seen it coming in his chambers at Casterly Rock. He summoned Seer Gregor Clegane. "Ride east," Tywin ordered. "Burn small villages, take nothing, leave no witnesses. Let the Riverlands bleed, and let the realm remember what happens when a lion is cornered." Gregor nodded without a word. The first sparks of rebellion had begun to kindle in the east. Daenerys Targaryen received strange news through Illyrio's spies. The usurper king had thrown out his queen. Rumors flew about a northern girl of stone, and Fury taking the throne beside him. Daenerys, still uncertain of her own future, felt a strange stirring in her heart. If Robert's hold on the realm was breaking, perhaps there was still a path for fire and blood to return. But in King's Landing, the unlikely bond between a drunken king and a wild girl began to grow. At a private feast, with only the small council present, Laynna Mormont refused sweetmeats, and instead requested roasted boar and strong mead. Robert laughed heartily. "She turned me sober yet." To everyone's surprise, Laynna raised her cup. "Not sober, Your Grace, just stronger." And for the first time in years, Robert Baratheon smiled like a king again. At Casterly Rock, the sun set in crimson streaks. Across the sea a fitting omen for what Lord Tywin Lannister was about to unleash. Word of Cersei's disgrace, the disinheritance of Joffrey, and Robert's upcoming marriage to a wildling child from Bear Island had hit him like a sword too. The chest. But Tywin Lannister did not panic. He calculated, he planned, and he prepared to make the realm bleed. Tywin gathered his bannermen in the grand stone hall of Casterly Rock. Lords from the Westerlands, Crakell, Marbrand, Lethadus, assembled under golden lion banners. They expected a call to arms, but Tywin gave them something more dangerous: silence. Then, with a voice cold as steel, he began. "We have been insulted," he said, "spat upon by a drunken king and a northern wolf. My daughter discarded, my grandchildren declared bastards, and our family made a mockery before the realm." Murmurs of outrage filled the hall. "They believe we will retreat to our rock and wait," he continued. "They believe we are too proud to strike." Tywin's green eyes narrowed. "They are wrong." Far to the east, Seer Gregor Clegane, the mountain had already begun his work. Under Tywin's orders, he crossed the border into the Riverlands, torching villagers, slaughtering innocents and leaving cryptic signs behind bloody lion sigils burned into the wood of farmhouses. The message was clear. House Lannister had not forgotten when word of the raids reached Riverrun. Lord Hoster Tully still, recovering from his failing health, sent out ravens and summoned his bannermen. Edmure Tully, hot-blooded and eager, begged for a march to war. But Lord Stark, now fully entrenched as Robert's most trusted advisor, cautioned restraint. "This is not yet war," Ned said in council. "This is warning." "The Lannisters don't warn," grunted Seer Roderick. "Castle, they roar." In the throne room, Robert bellowed with rage when the news reached him. Burning the Riverlands, for what an art. He slammed his goblet into the wall. "I should have Tywin's head on a spike." Ned remained composed. "Then summon him, bring him to court. Let the realm see how a lion answers for blood." Varys added gently, "Or let him refuse. And let the realm see that too." And so, the order was sent. Lord Tywin Lannister was summoned to court to explain his actions, but Tywin had no intention of appearing. Meanwhile, inside the Red Keep, Queen-to-be, Lyanna Mormont found herself at the heart of a court that viewed her with equal parts awe, confusion, and disdain. Many southern ladies whispered behind her back, mocking her rough speech and unpolished manners. But Lyanna didn't care. She spent her days training in the yard with Seer Barristan Selmy, her nights studying Westerosi history with Mester Pycelle, and her mornings walking with Lord Stark, who treated her not as a child, but as a political equal. That to Ned's surprise, she adapted quickly. She listened more than she spoke. She watched, read, and learned, and slowly some courtiers began to shift their views. She was not a decoration. She was not a puppet. She was something rare, a queen who was becoming stronger before taking the throne at a small council meeting. When Varys began speaking of food shortages in Fleabottom, Lyanna interrupted. "Send the extra grain stores from the Tower of the Righteous. Have the faith distributed. It will feed the poor and bind the Septon to our cause." The room went silent. Robert blinked. "Well, I'll be damned." Even Littlefinger looked impressed. "She's smarter than half this room," Ned muttered under his breath, but Cersei Lannister locked away. In her chambers was not idle. She used her maids to send secret letters to her brother Jaime, who was still at Harrenhal with a full company of Lannister knights. She promised him revenge, the crown and a kingdom forged in fire if he returned to her side. She also sent a raven to Dorne, appealing to old alliances from her mother's side. She promised Myrcella in marriage to a Martell prince if they helped raise a southern rebellion. The lioness had been caged but not declawed. As Tywin's armies gathered in secret near the Gold Road, the question lingered in every hall, from King's Landing to Old Town. Would House Lannister bend or break? In the Red Keep, Ned and Robert walked alone in the garden's an odd calm moment amidst the chaos. "Do you ever think we've gone too far, Ned?" Robert asked, swaying slightly with wine. "You mean replacing a queen? Disowning your heirs? Provoking Tywin Lannister?" Robert snorted. "That." Ned looked toward the sea. "If we've gone too far, then it's because we had to. Cersei was poison. Your crown was rust. This is cleansing fire." Robert didn't reply. For a moment, he looked old, truly old. And Ned realized, perhaps for the first time, that the fire still needed tending, or it would burn them all. The summons to King's Landing had been clear. Lord Tywin Lannister was to present himself before the Iron Throne and answer for the atrocities committed in the Riverlands. The tone of the message was ironclad, bearing the king's seal and the hand's own signature. But Tywin never responded. Instead, word came from the west that Lannister bannermen had begun to move openly now, no longer raiding but marching. Over 20,000 men, armored in crimson and gold, began to assemble. Near the Trident, the realm braced for war. Robert Baratheon, no longer drunk on wine but on purpose, held council daily in the great hall. His crown sat more firmly now, as if Lyanna Mormont's arrival had woken something in him, something long buried beneath years of excess and regret. He stood at the head of the council table, roaring orders like the warrior king he once was. We will not wait for the lion to roar in our face. We ride west, break their line, and drag Tywin to the Red Keep in chains. Your Grace, Ned said carefully, the Lannisters are not fools. If we strike without the Riverlands fully mobilized, we could be flanked. Robert slammed a fist down. Damn the Riverlands. I need fighters, not excuses. But it was Seer Barristan Selmy who finally broke the tension. Then let me lead the vanguard, Your Grace, he said. The realm will follow its kings into fire if need be. Robert, grinning, nodded. You'll have it. And so, the drums of war beat again in Westeros. Lady Mage, Mormont, upon hearing that her daughter was to marry the king, had been both proud and furious. But with Robert showing signs of renewed strength, and Lyanna growing into her role like a wolf in armor, Mage committed, she sent 300 Mormont warriors south to defend the new queen, along with messages to houses Glover, Manderley, and Karstark to prepare for a southern march should the war escalate. For the first time since the Greyjoy Rebellion, the North was preparing for bloodshed beyond the neck. Cersei Lannister's ravens had reached dawn, and though Prince Doran Martell responded with characteristic caution, the firebrand Oberyn Martell saw opportunity. A kingdom in chaos, he said. Perhaps it's time Dawn stopped mourning and started striking. And so, Dornish riders began to patrol the borders once more. Waiting. News of the coming war reached Daenerys Targaryen as she travelled through the Red Waste with her dwindling Khalasar. At first, she thought little of it. A usurper, replacing his queen. Let the lions and stags kill each other. But Seer Jorah saw further. If the Lannisters fall, he told her, and the kingdom weakens, it may be the time to return. And thus, a new ambition began to flicker behind Daenerys' eyes. Lyanna Mormont held fast to her position, even as rumors of assassination swirled. She continued her studies, sharpened her court etiquette, and at the request of Ned Stark began writing letters to northern houses in her own hand, asserting her role as Quintubi. Her words were firm, mature beyond her years, and imbued with northern pride. She does not flinch, Ned wrote to Catelyn. She will be a better queen than the realm deserves. But others were not as confident. The faith of the Seven, deeply uncomfortable with Robert's rejection of Cersei, had begun to stir. Some Septons called the new union unlawful, some outright heretical. Ned met with the High Septon himself. She is a child, my lord, unwed, unproven. Would you place the future of the realm on a girl barely in her teens? I would, Ned replied, if she is braver than any man in this city. The Septon only sighed. Then may the gods help us all. It came without warning. A Lannister host, led by Seer Von Lannister, crossed the Red Fork and torched several villages on Tully land, prompting Edmure, Tully and Brynden Blackfish to to respond with force. The battle took place near where the trident split into 3 arms. The fighting was brutal, but the Riverlords held the field, thanks in part to the arrival of Stark riders sent south under the command of Lord Rickard. The Lannisters were pushed back, but the cost was high hundreds dead, thousands wounded. Word of the battle reached King's Landing within days. Robert, clad in black and gold armor, looked over the Raven's message and whispered, "So it begins." Ned stood beside him. "We win this war, Robert, or there will be no throne to sit on." Robert turned, fire in his eyes. "Then we ride for the rock." And thus the great host began to assemble. Baratheons, Tullys, Starks, Arryns, Mormontees against the Lion. Spring rains fell over the Westerlands, turning roads into muck and fields into blood-washed soil. The war was no longer looming, it was here. Robert Baratheon led the royal host himself, mounted atop a black destrier and clad in golden armor adorned with the crowned stag. At his side rode Lord Eddard Stark, grim and steady as ever, and seer Barristan Selmy, who had donned his white cloak for what he believed might be the last time. The banners of the north, the Riverlands, and the Stormlands stretched across the rolling hills. Against them stood the banners of House Lannister, thick with crimson and gold, positioned defensively around Lannisport and the approaches to Casterly Rock. Behind those walls, Lord Tywin prepared for either a final stand or a deadly trap. This was no skirmish. It was to be the largest battle Westeros had seen since Robert's rebellion. But while armies clashed, the true fate of the realm was being decided far from the battlefield in chambers, in shadows, in the words exchanged between queens and kings, children and killers. Robert's war council had been split. Some, like Edmure Tully, argued for a slow siege of Casterly Rock. Others, like Renly, who had rejoined the king in hopes of stealing back influence, called for a swift attack to crush the Lannister army and seize Tywin himself. But Robert, for all his fury, chose a middle path, cut off Tywin's army from the rock by taking the coast, while sending smaller forces into the surrounding towns to draw out the Lion. The battle was fierce. Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, led a brutal counterattack. Outside the town of Cornfield, cutting down dozens with a greatsword the size of a small tree, but he was eventually unhorsed by Seer Barristan and nearly killed before Lannister reinforcements pulled him away. On the northern flank, Rickard, Karstark, and Brynden Tully routed a vanguard of Lannister archers, opening a path to the supply roads, and in the center, Robert himself crashed into Seer Kevan Lannister's men like a thunderstorm, hammer swinging with the strength of old. His armor was soaked in blood, his war cry ringing out louder than the clash of steel. By nightfall, the field belonged to the Baratheon alliance. The Lannister host was broken, scattered toward the rock. Tywin Lannister had escaped, but barely defeated. In battle and besieged at home, Tywin did what few had ever seen. He retreated. He abandoned Casterly Rock and sailed from Lannisport with what ships remained, heading south toward Old Town, hoping to regroup and ignite a second front from the Reach. But his reputation was shattered. His bannermen abandoned him. His name feared became a stain. Rumors swirled that even the Iron Bank of Bravos had cut off Lannister credit in his absence. The city of Lannisport opened its gates to Robert's forces without resistance. The rock itself did not fall, but it no longer mattered. The Lion had lost its roar. Back in King's Landing, Lyanna Mormont was crowned queen beside Robert Baratheon in the great sept of Baelor. She wore no silk, no jewels, only a silver circlet and a dark green cloak bearing the sigil of House Mormont. When the High Septon asked if she accepted her place as Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, she answered without hesitation, "I do, and I swear not to rule in comfort, but in honor, not to serve myself, but the realm." Even the southern lords, skeptical, at first were moved. She spoke with the clarity of someone twice her age. She was fierce, unbending, and completely unlike any queen Westeros had ever known. The people began calling her the Bear Queen. She refused to take up residence in the Queen's Tower and instead lived modestly in Maegor's Holdfast, surrounded by her shield maidens and a small household of northern retainers. She spent her days meeting with small folk, writing letters to distant bannermen, and strengthening ties with the Faith, the North, and the Riverlands. She never smiled for flattery, but she often laughed with children. And Robert, he changed. He drank less. He trained again. He spoke of reforming the realm, rebuilding the navy, reinforcing the wall, and even limiting the power of gold in court decisions. He still grumbled, still fought with Ned, still cursed, but he had become king again, not a relic of old glory, but a ruler reborn. Cersei Lannister, once queen of the Seven Kingdoms, now lived under constant guard in a remote tower overlooking Blackwater Bay. Her children were Gon Mycella, sent to Braavos under a different name. Tommen, taken in by the Faith for a holy fostering. Joffrey had vanished during the chaos of the war. Some say he was killed by a commoner. Others that he still roams the Stormlands in madness. But Cersei never broke. One evening she attempted to poison herself. The maid caught her. She said nothing. Another evening a raven arrived. From Essos, from a certain Sellsword company, known as the Golden Company. She smiled for the first time in years, because even when queens fall, some still play the game. The war was over, but peace was not yet certain. The Reach murmured, dawn stirred. The Iron Islands threatened, but with Tywin gone, the Lannisters shattered, and the North stronger than ever. The balance of Westeros had shifted. Queen Lyanna Mormont stood on the steps of the Red Keep one spring morning, looking out over the city as bells tolled in peace. Ned Stark stood beside her. "She's not the queen I expected," he said. "She's the queen we needed," Robert answered from behind them. The lion had been caged, the wolf had risen, and in the end a bear ruled them all.